Okay, this is a local news story from New Hampshire, but I thought it was interesting on a nationwide level. University of New Hampshire professor put on leave for allegedly posing as woman of color. A white male assistant professor was put on leave after he allegedly posed as a woman of color. He tweeted under an account called The Science Femme. In tweets this year, the user made some personal comments about his department and about the culture of woke activism. He used images of an unidentified woman for his account. If you look at the man here, he's clearly a person of color. If he had any more red hair on his face would be on fire. So I'm guessing color is not the actual problem. Let's continue reading and figure out what this man's crime was. The school's chemistry department chair, Glenn Miller, in an email to faculty, confirmed the account belonged to Chapman. He was identified by a series of tweets to his brother's brewery. Social media users began to raise concerns once they started to recognize how combative the account was, especially against those on the left. When was it against the law to make posts against left-wing politics? Apparently this is now a crime. Another professor, Susuna Harris, who worked in science communications, even noticed the account earlier this year. Okay, I'm still looking for the crime here. The professor of science communications noticed the account. So being noticed is now a crime. So this is where our country is heading. Not being a Democrat will be a crime. Not voting Democrat will be a crime. And finally, not thinking Democrat will be a crime. For those who read George Orwell's 1984, this is called the 2-minute hate. It's where every day the devotees of Big Brother were ordered to scream their hatred of a man named Goldberg for 2 minutes each day. And the goal was to top the person next to you and how much hatred you could scream at the target of Big Brother's ire. George Orwell was speaking about socialism and totalitarian leftists and fascism as well when he wrote that book. So I recommend it to anyone who has not read 1984. So I'm still trying to figure out why Susana Harris thinks that only views that are identical to hers are permitted online. Why would it matter if she noticed this account or not? She decided to do a little poking around to see if it was a real person. Again, where is the crime here? The executive director of UNH Media Relations, Erica Mance, said the school was aware of allegations and is looking into the matter. This professor here, he's not accused of attempting to reveal personal information, of doxing people he disagrees with. He's not accused of swatting, of sending the FBI to someone's house that he didn't like during an Xbox game. Those are clearly horrible online behaviors. His only crime was speaking in general terms about how he disliked institutional academia's insistence that everyone follow the leftist mandate of thought culture and thought police to serve the Democratic Party and the global left. That's this man's crime. His crime is a thought crime, straight out of George Orwell's 1984. Thought crime is when you think differently than the majority. You do remember this country has something called the U.S. Constitution. And the Bill of Rights has something called the First Amendment. He has a right to an opinion. He has a right to express that opinion. We are deeply troubled by what we've learned so far. The employee is on leave and not in the classroom. So you are placed on leave if you express opinions at odds with leftists. It is a crime to think differently than leftists. It is a crime to post opinions at odds with the Democratic Party. First of all, America has a long tradition of using pseudonyms to protect yourself from retaliation. Going back to the American Revolution, you could be hanged for insulting the King of England for expressing revolutionary opinions. More locally, if you expressed opinions against your particular county or town's leadership, they would find very personal ways to deal with you, and they could be violent ways that would end your voice permanently. So consider the case of this man here, Craig Chapman, chemistry professor. his thought crime was of going against what the other people working at the University of New Hampshire think. So let's do a little history lesson for the alleged educators, alleged teachers, alleged professors, and alleged administrators of the University of New Hampshire. Let's give them a little refresher on American history. Benjamin Franklin was a printer. He would print opinions that were offensive to the ruling elites under the pseudonym Silence Dogood. He used this to effect social change. He also did this because he knew there would be stern retaliation if it was known by the targets of Silence Dogood's columns that the publisher of the newspaper in question was the author of those columns. Again, that is the crime that chemistry professor Craig Chapman has been accused of expressing opinions under a pseudonym. Let's continue. Thomas Paine was an immigrant to America who wrote the pamphlet Common Sense. Note here, Common Sense was published anonymously on January 10, 1776, at the beginning of the American Revolution, and became an immediate sensation. So you can see here, I'm not saying that the views of chemistry professor Craig Chapman are on par with our founding fathers. That's not the point. His views don't have to be epic or perfect or anything. They're simply his views. And he, as we see from the response from his co-workers and from the school's administrators, Craig Chapman had every reason to fear retaliation had he posted these views under his name for the thought crime of differing with these other people. These other people were angry and spent all of their off hours and business hours trying to track down his identity. The Federalist Papers, which is the basis of our judicial system and much of our Constitution, of course, is a collection of 85 articles and essays written by Alexander Hamilton, he's on our money, James Madison, and John Jay, under the collective pseudonym Publius. Now, why would they feel the need to publish under this pseudonym? Because high treason against the crown was punishable by death. They would have been killed. So that's the history lesson, not for the chemistry professor who's been accused of having an opinion. This is a history lesson for the faculty at the University of New Hampshire. And I'm not singling them out in any way. That's a very ordinary university with a very ordinary administrative setup, very typical faculty, and it is representative of the faculty and administration of colleges and universities across the entire United States of America. This is how the Democratic Party seizes control of our culture and our political system. They indoctrinate. They do not teach. They do not instruct. They indoctrinate. You must adhere to all of the policies of the Democratic Party. If you do not adhere to those policies, you are guilty of thought crime. This is one of the things that this chemistry professor stated, that the school possessed a toxic ideology that cannot be given an inch. So he's precisely right. And the response of the faculty and the administration of that school confirmed that chemistry professor Craig Chapman was entirely correct in what he claimed. They proved him right. They proved him completely right. This man should not be hounded and put on leave for having views about how the left coordinates and crushes dissent. This man should be running that university. And all these angry leftists attempting to discover the identity of his pseudonym, they should be canned from education. The angry leftists that are in charge of sitting in judgment of this chemistry professor should be thrown out of academia and never be allowed to teach a single American student again. This man's views are the views of Silence Dogood, Common Sense, the Federalist Papers, and those who persecute him for having an opinion. They are the enemies of free thought, the enemies of tolerance, the enemies of open-mindedness. Not this man. And it's just a very small news story. It's largely unimportant in the grand scheme of things. But he is the tip of the iceberg. This chemistry professor is just a tiny example of how leftist thought police wish to control every aspect of American society. Their eventual goal is to make it a crime to ever vote against them, to make it a crime to ever have an opinion at the workplace at variance with them. They've largely succeeded in that, of course. And the ultimate goal of American leftists is to make it a crime to run against leftists and to win. As you've seen with President Trump, the Southern District of New York continues to persecute him, his family, and his businesses for the crime of defeating Hillary Clinton in 2016. The Democratic Party is not so democratic after all, and it's an effort from top to bottom to control America. Not a conspiracy, but it's simply a common goal of leftists everywhere. These leftists don't care if they destroy our country and make it look like Venezuela. As long as their ideology triumphs, they don't care how many people they harm, they don't care how many lives are ruined, and they don't care if a country's economy is crushed. All that matters is that the ideology wins. Ideology comes first and last to people who are only concerned with their own power. And as you can see here, why would an entire faculty and administration at a university place such high importance on making sure that no one who works there has an independent point of view from liberal, leftist, progressive ideology? The vehemence that they went after this chemistry professor tells you everything you need to know about the intolerant left. They are totalitarian, they are fascists, and they are the enemy of everything that our country was founded on. Our country was founded to fight against oppression like this. It's why our founding fathers had to use pseudonyms to protect themselves and their livelihood, precisely as this man attempted to do, but his efforts were not enough. When an entire state and an entire education system is aligned against him, how can a man of principle prevail? Only if other people of principle speak up in his defense. Thank you.